right. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to introduce to the stage Mr. Peter Landeros. Peter is the official spokesperson for the Piscataway Indian Nation. He is also the director for the Eastern Woodlands Territory Support Band of the American Indian Movement, and he is our new Commissioner of Indian Affairs under the Moore administration. Peter?
Thank you, Peter. To start out this conversation, the first thing we're going to do is the land acknowledgement for the Mattapique people who used to be here. This is their land that we're on, and we have to honor them and give them the due respect because they're the original stewards of this land. And saying that, I also want to say there isn't a place that you can put your feet down that isn't Indian land. Remember that. And the reason why we are here is because from this date forward, we want to be included in all planning and all aspects of the government so that our voices are heard. Back to Peter Brooks.
So guys, this is what making history feels like. Whatever that feeling is you have in your stomach, this is what we want you to share with your communities when you go back. Because this is a historic moment for us as a nation, because prior to this meeting, the only planning we feel that had to do with the Piscataways was about removal. And so now that each of you are willing to at least listen and make some type of gesture of interest and commitment into changing that narrative is historic. Each of you are history makers, and we appreciate your coming here. Planners, you control our future. So we take you very, very seriously. And I think each of you deserves a round of applause just for being here today. I acknowledge you and thank you. I thank you because it's been a long time. So for most of you, when you do history and stuff like that, it starts at colonization. And so we're here to introduce ourselves and tell you that you can start with our history now. And these are some of the people who can tell you that history. I'm joined, as you introduced, from Mr. Peter Landeros, and then Mr. Lynn Harris from the Salagi tribe, Cherokee. Lynn, would you like to say some words?
My name is Lynn Harris. I'm the past chairperson for the American Indian and Alaskan Native Advisory Council for the federal government. I'm retired, but I'm still connected with the different indigenous natives all over the United States and Alaska. And I keep in close contact with them, and down the road we'll have certain events and ceremonies and so forth. And thank you for having me today to be with us.
Oh. And Tom Bradshaw. Tom is from the Nassau-Wawash tribe, which is here on the Eastern Shore. So you had 4 Indians in your room and didn't know it. And so this is part of the history. So if you can see this map, this is basically what John Smith saw when he first came here. As you can see, he first started in the Jamestown area. And if you could see the map, and the map is available at the Maryland State Archives, you would see a whole bunch of little villages or tribes or communities represented along here. It gets more sparse as he comes into the Chesapeake Bay about 3 or 4 years after he landed in Jamestown. He decided to go north. It becomes sparse because everyone's fleeing him. They don't want to contact him after the Pocahontas disaster and stuff like that. But there is a tribe that waits for him, sort of planned meeting. That is the Susquehannock tribe, and we'll get to that in just a second. So this loose confederation of tribes and tribal people who call themselves Piscataway have lived on these lands for countless generations. The Piscataway refer to ourselves as the people from the place where the waters blend, up above the rapids. So it seems just like the water, the Piscataway people come from the earth itself. And this is not unique. Most American Indian tribes have a name that associates the origin of the people with the earth itself. Oops, sorry about that. As an example, Lynn's tribe, Salagi, Cherokee, means the people from the caves, the people who dwell in the caves. The Anishinaabe are the people of the earth, so it's not uncommon. The place that we currently call Baltimore would have been called Patapscut, or the place of jutting rocks. And so our presence here today is to ask you how much more meaningful it is for your children when they go into an admissions office or in a national meeting to say, I come from the place where the rocks reach for the sky, as opposed to saying Baltimore, which is a person's name that we may not ever have any association with. By going back to the original name, you give the children a reason to love the place where they come from. It's a unique characteristic that you can't find, elsewhere in the region. So this is why we're here. The Eastern Woodlands tribes still retain a philosophy that is very utilitarian. As an example of what I mean, these tribes would not have traveled very far from their original homeland. That's because their grandparents are buried in this land. And so I'm not going to wander far because I want to be with my grandparents, when I go into the earth as well. And so that's why, even to this day, it's doubtful that the Piscataway Indian Nation would have gone to Europe or gone to Africa. It's just not our thing. But according to all, the stories, all of these tribes were pretty much under the Piscataway. This is a great confederacy of tribes. They are under respected leaders who they rely on for wisdom, diplomacy, guidance, advice, jurisprudence. This is the role of the Tayak. And these qualities, coupled with inclusion and reverence for the land and maintenance of the spiritual and cultural traditions, such as the ceremonies, have been embodied by the lineage of Tayak chiefs that have led the Piscataway through the history of time until today. As this map shows, the Piscataway Empire at one time, 1492, extended from parts of Virginia through Pennsylvania and into New York. And I know Wes Moore probably wishes he was governor of that empire as opposed to what we have today. I don't know. But it's an interesting thing. This map comes as a result of the ambassador of the Piscataway Indian Nation explaining that the Susquehannock tribe were originally under the Tayak. Our current Tayak, Mark Tayak. Mark is the 29th hereditary chief of the Piscataway Indian Nation. Okay? His empire, if you will, was not maintained through military acquisition. He's no Napoleon. His parents were instead, it starts, we think, at about 700 or 800 AD, or CE as they say now. And the allegiance of such a large swath of geography comes from the honor, the mutual consent, the familiarity, the recognition, the generational acknowledgement that this is a chief, okay? And it still exists today, still retains regional authority. So there are many tribal communities identified in Maryland, and all of these communities shared that freedom and independence and liberty that all of your ancestors came here to experience and that you enjoy today. In my view, the only way to look at the colonization is to imagine as some kind of natural disaster. So the Tayac is not just our political leader, he is our spiritual leader. So when he is deposed by his own brother at the direction of the early Marylanders, it throws the entire empire into chaos because of the nature of it and the fact that we've lost our leader. Now, if you recall at that time, when the British came here, they wore red coats and white shirts, right? Native Americans were in camouflage. We seek to blend in with our environment. So when people say today that there are no Native Americans in Maryland or no Native Americans in West Virginia, it's because we blended in. Just like we did today, we were sitting amongst you and you didn't know we were here. So there are Indian communities that have survived, and that's what we're here to tell you, because we know a lot of the information you get says that we don't exist. So yeah, we lost about 90% of the empire to influenza, smallpox. We never had the bubonic plague. We never domesticated animals, no chickens, cats, anything like that. Animals were free. So all those diseases that you were accustomed to, we had no defense for it at that time. But since then, even today, leaders and bands of the Piscataway, their relatives, were running from here to New York and elsewhere to find refuge. There are Piscataway all across the eastern woodlands. There's even a band of Piscataway that returned from the Battle of Fallen Timbers in Ohio in 1794. From there, at least here's some of the maps you'll see. Don't even mention the fact that there are Piscataway Indians. In this one, the name Conoy is the name that was given to us by other people, all right? So you'll hear Conoy all the time, but this map is consistent. The Piscataway Empire would have gone from Maryland up through, if the Susquehannocks were subordinate, up through Pennsylvania and into New York. So from that time, and this is a picture of me and my grandmother, we've been hiding in plain sight. Some of us in black communities. Lynn and I, our families are from Sandtown, Winchester, which is the highest density of African Americans anywhere just about. So yeah, we hid out in black communities. The same thing happens to the Lenape who are in Delaware, in Middleton, Delaware, and stuff like that. But because for them, if you told them you were an Indian, it was a bad thing. When I say that this is changing the narrative, our most recent encounter with the government and stuff was the Indian Removal Act of 1830. That was like the big, so since then we're looking for opportunities to rectify. Today the Tayac maintains regional authority. He is still a spiritual and political leader. He sets an example for us through economic development. If you go to a powwow, you may find the Tayac there selling jewelry. He's setting an example. He maintains all of our culture, all of our history, our traditions. To say that being the Piscataway Tayac is the most important or oldest seat in Maryland is probably unfair, because his empire also includes parts of Virginia and Pennsylvania, and what he does and decides impacts people in North Carolina. Part of the reason why the Lumbees are in Baltimore is because the Tayac went down and brought them up from Baltimore. And so it's hard to gauge the impact of the Tayac, but you can bet if a UFO or some foreign person came into Wilkes-Barre or Harrisburg or even Elmira, New York, on down through here into the coast of Virginia, into Lorton and stuff, they would have taken that person to see the Tayac, because the Tayac would know what to do. He was sort of the ultimate authority for the people, all right? The Piscataways have never forgotten their bond to the land and to the water. The Piscataway Indian nation of today still heeds the instructions of our ancestors. We have never left. We still safeguard our sacred sites. We are incredibly resilient and relevant. And no matter what Marylanders say, you are a part of our heritage. All right, let that sink in for a little while. We date back like 10,000, 15,000 years. You're coming in the past 300 years or so. So you're like a chapter in our book, even though right now it looks like we're a footnote in your book. It's actually the other way around, I would argue. So it's part of your heritage. It's part of your inheritance, these Indians, us Indians. Just like the Allegheny Mountains and the Chesapeake Bay, we were here before you. And just as you take care of those things as a natural resource, so are these natural resources for you as well, for economic development, for community stability, all kinds of things that we add. I mean, you've got to admit, the Eastern Woodland Indians practiced sustainability and ecology and conservation at a very high level for human beings. So there's a lot of expertise in there. And finally, I would argue that this is really your responsibility because it's tied to your destiny. Here's Mark with his father, Billy. The previous slide was Turkey Tayac. Because when you include Native Americans, the Piscataway Indian Nation, in your planning, you're not just acknowledging us and your roots as human beings, that we're fellow human beings, but in engaging your history, you're engaging your future. Because see, for us, it is the rivers and the mountains who tell our stories. See, for you, it's the books and the internet, but for us, it's the rivers and the mountains. So we're part of this land. And so that's what we wanted to reiterate to you. Billy Tayac, Nietzsche Tayac will be the next Tayac, the 30th Tayac, God willing, his grandson. So with that, I'd like to introduce Peter Landeros. Peter will discuss with you, I've just discussed with you the Piscataway Indian Nation, all right? There are a bunch of tribes in Maryland, like 7 or so, that the state of Maryland recognizes in some of that history. Peter is about to go over the statewide history for you.